So everyone, we have the amazing composer, Mr. Graham Fitkin here. Graham, thank you so much for taking the time out and having a chat with me this morning. How is it all going for you at the moment? So this is lockdown 3, by the way. We're in lockdown 3 at the moment.
It's okay. It's okay. Thank you. I'm still sort of soldiering on, playing and, well, composing I'm composing, what am I doing? I'm composing this piece for Truro City Centre at the moment, which is a sort of app where you navigate the city via music. So you decide to turn left or you decide to turn right and the music changes with you. So I have to create a whole bloody load of zones, if you like, which can work together, because if you want to turn around, you want to be able to hear it at the same time. Everything's got to synchronize, and it's doing my head in a bit.
Oh my God, that sounds mental.
It is. It's a completely different way for me of working. I mean, people who are used to doing video games and stuff like that, maybe they're more used to it. But for me, I'm used to writing music in that way. So it starts here and it finishes there, and that's not happening. So it's it's really exciting as well, because it's.
Of course, there's a siren. Of course.
Oh, of course.
Sorry, carry on.
Sirens are part of it, but and in fact, sirens are very much part of the piece that I'm writing. So that's good. So yeah, there's lots of site-specific stuff. So I'm writing that. I've finished a piece for string quartet and saxophone, Soprano Quartet, and Simon Harram on saxophone, and other bits and bobs. I'm involved in a big orchestral piece on Humphrey Davy as well. So there's lots of things I'm juggling at the moment.
Keeping busy. So I'd love to know kind of how it all started for you, how all the composition started. Was it something you'd always wanted to do?
Well, it started with my mum was a piano teacher, so she taught me piano and had the good foresight to allow me to give up whenever I was bored. So I started that at about the age of 6, probably, and got bored and gave up, and then I sidled back and I just sort of start pissing about on the piano because I quite like the sound of it. Yeah. And she'd say, "Oh, well, if you want to, I can give you another." I'd say, "Yeah, go on, yeah, I'd like to." So we did a bit more, and then I get bored again, and she'd say, "Okay, up to you," and then I'd sidle back, and it sort of went on until I was about 10 or 11. And then I got another teacher. So she was fed up with this boy who kept coming and going. But the thing which got me going was actually, even then, I was sort of interested by the sounds. I really didn't want to practice. I wanted to piss about and make things up. So when I was about 10 or 11, I made up pieces of bits and bobs. I recomposed Moonlight Sonata, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, because it's a rubbish key. C sharp minor is just such a.
Why?
Why wouldn't you put it in A minor and put some blue notes in and to make it a bit more jazzy? So I did that for a bit.
Cool.
And then
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But then you mentioned blue notes and jazzy, so that's obviously like a massive part of it. Did you ever actually study jazz specifically?
Well, I was lucky enough, or I am lucky enough, to have a brother who's 5-6 years older than me, and he would feed me all these nuggets. So I remember at the age of 11, he said he gave me for Christmas The Rite of Spring on vinyl, and then he gave me some Keith Jarrett and some Philip Glass. So these things were coming into my orbit, and he was a big jazz fan at that point. So I was listening to jazz all the time. Sort of unknown trumpeters like Muggsy Spanier and then Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and all of that malarkey, and that certainly went in. And then I was trying to transcribe some of Jarrett's Colne concert by ear, which I wasn't very good at. But there were certain bits I could get, and certain bits I just hopeless at. But it sort of got me in there. So I didn't. Did I study it? Not really. No. I mean,
you were exposed to it constantly.
Constantly, yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. See, I really wish I was, especially now because my other half is a jazzer.
Right.
And it's only now at like the age of 40 I'm starting to get exposed to, obviously I knew about, Jarrett and Dizzy Gillespie and all of this, but now there's just names coming up and things playing in the background that I'm going, that I recognise that. And it's really weird, right? We had some Pat Metheny on the other day.
Yeah.
Do you like Pat Metheny?
No.
Do you not? I came out of the kitchen and went, What's that?
Yeah.
And I went, that's Graham Fitkin. I'm sorry, like whatever that is Graham Fitkin. And he went, it is? Do you reckon he's been influenced by Pat Metheny? And I was like, oh, he must have been. Absolutely must have been.
No, I never got into Pat Metheny ever for some unknown reason. Yeah, but that doesn't mean it didn't go in. But no, strangely enough, no. I mean, I was actually more at that point. I was more interested in the sort of at that point when am I talking about? When I was in my teenage years, I actually listened to quite a lot of free jazz. I had a friend of mine and we were sort of exploring it together. So we listened to a lot of Ornette Coleman and later John Coltrane. And somehow, I don't listen to that at all really now, but at the time, I found it quite, I don't know, broadening in some way, I suppose.
Yeah. Am I right in saying you went over to Europe and studied with Andreessen?
Yeah. So I went to Nottingham first and studied with Peter Nelson and Nigel Osborne, and then they suggested that afterwards I went to work with Andreessen in Holland, which was great because he's such a strong character and has very strong views on, at that point at least, he had very strong views on the way one should compose and shouldn't compose. And so I was sort of at first I was thinking, what do you mean I shouldn't be doing this? I should be doing that. And so we'd have little arguments about stuff. But it was a real, it sort of allowed me to work out what I wanted to do, really, which and that was the start of me sort of thinking, okay, well, I don't know, I quite enjoy doing this composition stuff. So I'm just going to carry on doing it and see what happens, but follow what I wanted to do, which wasn't specifically an Andreessen path or indeed any other path, but yeah.
Cool. So I obviously got to know your music when I joined Piano Circus. So I would love you to tell everyone, like, the relationship between yourself and Piano Circus, like how that came about and what on earth were you thinking when someone came up and said, like, can you do this for 6 pianos? Were you already doing like multiple instruments at that point?
Well, I was, although I can't remember the chronology of it, but I was interested in doing, in fact, when I was in Holland with Andreessen, one of the things which I decided I wanted to do was use multiple copies of the same timbre. So I wrote pieces for 4 people on 2 pianos. And I wrote a series of those. I wrote 3-4 of those. And what I liked about that was that it was monotimbral, so that I didn't have to think about orchestration, and I thought it was much more honest at that time. I don't know, the arrogance of youth, but that idea of just sort of paring it down so that timbre wasn't really an issue. So if it could be all pianos at that point. And then I was asked to write pieces for Ensemble Bash, the percussion group, and I remember them sending me this instrument list with 132 percussion instruments that I could use. And I thought, I think I'll just use all of them doing the same thing on the same instrument. So I got them to work with 4 marimbas, and they all had a kick drum as well and a bongo, and that was it. And so that was the sort of thing I was interested in doing. And then I can't remember whether this was after Piano Circus or before, but I got interested in writing pieces for saxophone ensemble, saxophone quartet, clarinet ensemble, so that it was all multiples of the same thing. So I can't remember how the first piece, I was asked to write one piece for Piano Circus, which was loud at the time. So that came through first. And I remember it was difficult. It was really difficult. I remember sitting on the stairs, tearing my hair out in a flat in London, going, what am I doing? I can't do this. Anyway, I did it. So that's loud. And then they asked me to do 2 others. I think it was probably, actually one other, and then probably a third one. But after the second one, I have a feeling that I had a chat with Max Richter, and I said, look, I've done this and that. I quite like to do log to tie it all together. I think that's how it happened.
Yeah.
But I might be wrong. I might be making all this up, and it's a complete story and fabrication. But that's my memory of it.
Absolutely not. And this is Graham's fantastic trilogy for piano solos called Log Line Loud or Loud Line Log, whichever
Yes.
kind of.
Yes, it sort of runs off the tongue as log line loud, but it is in fact loud line log.
Loud Line Log. So
Yes.
that's a little listening thing. I'll probably put a link somewhere to that as well, which is an epic piece that we still very much play all the time now. One of our most popular things, and it has been since the 90s.
Line was the slow one. It's a much more sustained piece. The final piece, Log, sort of involves elements of both pieces, because Loud is punchy, sharp, loud, staccato. Line is very sustained, and Log has elements of both, so it was a sort of tying the three things together.
I should move on to the piece that we're actually going to perform at the end of this video, which is Hard Fairy, which is pianos and saxophone. So obviously you've got quite a relationship with the piano and the saxophone.
Yes, certainly the piano, first of all, is the main thing. I mean, that was the first instrument that I liked. And the thing I like about it, as I said a moment ago, really, is that you can have multiple notes going on without any timbral differentiation. So you're not being creative with orchestration. You're not making a beautiful sound necessarily. It's just what it is. And I quite like that aspect of the piano and that aspect of multiples of the same timbre. The saxophone, I first used the saxophone in a piece which was a multi-timbral piece, which was unusual for me, which is a little sort of, it was about the Spanish Civil War, called Drum, which was put on the Almeida Theatre in 1990 probably. And the best thing which ever happened to that was right at the end of the first performance was this guy in the front row got up, and there was this moment of pause after it all stopped. And he got up, he said, "Absolute rubbish," and walked off. And there was this huge cheer. So I wasn't quite sure they were cheering for the piece or cheering for him. Either way, it's a great moment.
That's a great. Isn't it great to have critiques like that?
Yeah, we should have more. Oh, stop it, everybody! Stop it. Yeah. Okay. Right.
So I want to ask. So in the original recording, which, as you know, I listen to all the time. Again, Hard Fairy is just one of my favourite pieces ever. You had John Lenihan and John Hall playing, and yourself playing as well. The three of you. I mean, this might be a silly question, but why John Lenihan and why John Hall? I mean, they're fucking amazing.
Yeah. Well, I think that was probably
the three.
Probably. Well, that was the reason. I mean, it's John Hall was the first one that I knew John from the Guildhall, possibly, when I'd been into the Guildhall doing some things, and so it was him who was the one that I definitely wanted to be involved in that. And then he suggested John Lenihan because the two of them worked together, and I didn't know John Lenihan at that point. So John Lenihan and I had to do the interlocking of the piano parts, which is, it's, as you know, it's not an easy thing. No, it's a little fucker.
Yeah, absolutely. What did you think when I called you up and I was like, Graham, what do you reckon to me multi-tracking your piano stuff? You're like, well, okay.
No, not at all. Because actually, of all the people you could have asked, I'd have thought, yeah, actually, that's the sort of thing which I would try and attempt as well. In fact, I have attempted it with varying degrees of success, but not on this piece though. So, and this is a tricky one. It's just, it's tricky. It's tricky. I mean, individually the parts aren't easy. So, but then to actually lock them in is really quite tricky. Although I think probably in a a lot of it depends on the acoustic. If you're playing live in a gig, it depends on the reverb in the hall. That can make a massive difference, I think, as to how successful it can be.
Oh God, absolutely.
I've heard performances by brilliant musicians where the hall is just too reverberant, or the pianos aren't just in the right place, and I can feel them struggling. They're doing a brilliant job and they can play it brilliantly, but it's just not quite there.
Yeah.
And it's not their fault, it's just the space sometimes.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, we've got the wonderful soprano saxophonist Sarah Field doing this, and I at the moment, kind of my bit is done, and I'm crossing fingers and hope that when the sax comes on top, it's all going to work fine.
I can't wait to hear it.
It was definitely a challenge, because I'm so used to playing your music generally, but I'm used to the eye contact with the next person and the cues and the ensembling it in together, whereas I had to play with myself. I know, and it's I'm not quite sure how you did it. So you do realise a lot of things about your own playing. And I was like, you'd have to listen back and then listen back again and then try and play something in, and then it wouldn't work. And why won't it work? Why is it not together? Oh, because I'm being a bit fronty, or I'm being a bit behind. And when I do that, I tend to rush a bit, and when I do that, I tend to pull back a bit.
I know, it's a learning curve, isn't it, for yourself? Yeah. Yes, I know. And strangely enough, when I did another recording of the same piece with Simon Harron on saxophone, and Ruth, my partner Ruth, on the other piano, and Simon is such a metronome. I've never come across a musician who's more of a metronome, and so he would point out places where I would be slightly ahead, or Ruth, you would be slightly ahead. And I'd be thinking, is that true? And then I come back and work with the metronome. I think, yeah, fucking hell, he's absolutely right on the money. I am doing that. So there are places where, even though I think of myself as a fairly stable performer doing my stuff, I still am dragging or going ahead. And it's good to be reminded.
It is good to be reminded, absolutely. So we've talked about the hard fairy period, I suppose, and the logline loud period and that piano circus period. That was all kind of like late 90s, am I right, through the 90s?
It was the 90s, yeah. I think hard fairy was 94-ish. Well, actually, it started work as a piece for BBC Two for a series of programmes they were doing on Dance on Camera, I think it was called. Mm-hmm. So that's where a lot of the musical material was written for that. But then it changed, and I made it into a proper piece later.
So after the 90s, do you think your style kind of changed? Do you think, with the we all grow up a bit and different things become important, and because that 90s period was kind of maybe characterized, please tell me if I'm wrong, by kind of a heavy groove based, very rhythmic, very post minimalistic kind of style. Do you think since then anything's kind of changed at all?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was like that then, and occasionally it's still a bit like that now. But I suppose I got more interested in other things, really. One of the things which happened, and that happened in the 90s, was that I became composer in residence with the Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra, which was a great thing to do. But as I've already explained, I was interested in monotonal things, and an orchestra, it sort of goes against that. So the reason I did that was because I suppose I thought, gosh, somebody's offered me the chance of being a composer in residence with an orchestra. I'm not going to turn that down, because I could learn a lot, which I did. In essence, in retrospect rather, I think I allowed myself to go down the orchestral path too much. I think there are things which I wish I'd not done now. I think I made bad choices for myself. It's not that the pieces were bad. I think that, some of the pieces are great, and I'm still like them. But I think that I should have worked out what I wanted to do a bit more first, so that I could have used the orchestra to my own devices rather than being buffeted by it, really. So that just shows a weakness in my own character, I think. But
that's a bit harsh.
But no, I think now when I use an orchestra, I'm much more comfortable with what I wanted to do, and I won't be swayed so much. But it did allow me to enjoy orchestration, so I became more interested in timbre. So that was one thing. So I was quite happy to put different sorts of instruments together.
Yeah.
But then I had to find a way of getting the same sort of clarity. I mean, if you like, it's because I've got such a brain which needs to reduce things down to the minimum. So, for me, a monotimbral thing meant, great, I don't have to worry about orchestra. I don't have to worry about text. I can just do this thing. And so as soon as you open the timbre up, I think, I've got to close something else down to make my world nice and small so I can control it again. So that's what I tried to do so there will be a lot of rhythmic unison. For instance, I was asked to write a piece for a sextet, brilliant guys, called the Fibonacci sequence. And for me, a very unusual combination. So it was violin, cello, horn, clarinet, piano. Yeah, violin, viola, cello, horn, clarinet, piano. And I'm thinking, shit, what do I do with this sort of thing? In the end, I wrote a sort of 12-minute long monody, which is incredibly jagged all over the place. But at least for me, I was reducing the parameters so that I could think in terms of one thing, one tune. It doesn't sound like one tune because it's going up through octave ranges constantly. Yeah. But it was that was me trying to mold my little world again.
Cool.
So sorry, to answer your question a bit more, my music has changed since the 90s, and presumably, and I hope, will continue to change. I've got more interested in timbre. I use more synths. You may not be able to see them. I don't know.
Which was going to be, I was going to ask, this was going to be my next question, actually. So maybe we can tie it in.
About
your use of tech.
Yeah.
Generally in music, and how much you love that, and whether that was something you kind of go out there to do, or...
Well, interestingly, I think I thought I need this sort of sound in this piece. How am I going to do that? And I couldn't find a way of doing it without doing it electronically. So that was how I got into it in the first place. And I'm not a technophile. I'm a technophobe, really, in many ways. And so I use technology to do what I need to do. And I'm not interested in the technology particularly. I wish I was more so, because I think I'd get more out of it. But so, for instance, I use Logic, but I only use Logic to the ability that I need to use it. There's so many things I still don't know about it, which I'm not interested in, really. But I mean, I do find for me that the Moog synths are probably my favourite things to use, because I do understand them a bit more, and I can think, okay, that's got the right sort of sound, but I need to mould it and I need to change it, and I think I can work out how to do that. And then, of course, you get surprise elements coming in, and I suppose that's the job of most composers, or many composers anyway, is noticing the things. Noticing stuff and then thinking, So it doesn't matter if I'm outside going for a walk and I hear something, or I hear somebody speaking, or I make a mistake when I'm playing the piano, or I drop a pencil. I'm sort of, part of my job is to be aware of anything which is going on, in case it might be useful. And so I get things wrong with the synths quite a lot, and that's probably quite useful, actually, because
absolutely. So this is like your studio. I'm really interested. Every time I talk to a composer, I'm really interested in their background and like where they work. And I'm like, that's what it looks like. So
what are you looking at? You're looking at. You can see. Yeah, this behind this is a harmonium, which came from because I'm in a village, and it came from the local village chapel, and there were and it hadn't been moved since 1690 or something, and they said, look, can you house this for a bit, or can you look after it? Actually, I can't remember exactly what they said, but anyway, I am looking after it, and it's still here. And it's brilliant. It's I love the sound of the pedals. I don't know if you can hear the pedals, but just even, I don't know if you can.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But I can't do it with one foot, of course, but... anyway, I went
God, I'm waiting for the piece to get like double harmonium.
Sorry, say that again.
I'm waiting for the double harmonium piece.
Yes. Well, I know that. Wouldn't that be good? Wouldn't that
That'd
be
be
good?
amazing.
Yeah. But I mean, with that piece, I'm actually more interested in the sound of that pedal, which you may not have come across on that. But for me here, the sound of that little boinging is just brilliant.
It's great.
It's got to be used.
Absolutely great. So then, generally, how has the last year been for you? When I speak to composers, and I ask them specifically about lockdown and how it's been, some of them have been, oh God, it's terrible. You know, it's given me a chance to have a break. I need a break. I need to get out of my head. Other people have said it's pretty similar. As a composer, it's pretty similar to what it was anyway, because you're kind of slightly more isolated generally anyway when you work. And other people have said I've, really kind of enjoyed it. How has it been for you?
The way I've worked has been exactly the same for most of it, because like your second option of composer, I just carried on working, and much of my life is spent isolated. But I did have a lot of performances this last year, which were all cancelled, which is a pain, of course. And not only that, but Ruth and I had organised a festival, which involved people coming from all over the world up to Scotland for a festival, which we've been running for the last few years. That had to be cancelled. So that was the thing is, I've been working for a year on that. And there's a project for this year, 2021, which I've been working on for 2 years, and I have a feeling that that's falling down. And when I say working on, it's not been every day, but it's been a significant amount of time. So probably if I bunched all the time together I spent on it, it would be 7 or 8 months of work, completely gone, probably. So in a sense, whilst my working day hasn't changed, the annoyance and the sadness of that has and sort of feeling of wasted opportunities, if you like. That's sort of been there constantly in my head, and that's not very nice, certainly. But I mean, in comparison with most people, I'm very lucky. And we live in Cornwall, where during lockdown, certainly the first lockdown, nobody was here, and so I could go out for my daily run, and it was just joyous.
Oh, I bet it was.
Yeah, I mean, we had good weather, of course, in that first lockdown. It's it's a bit more trying now when it's okay. It's lovely today, but it's not.
It has been trying, yeah, especially in the past few weeks. And of course, your partner Ruth is. I'm actually not sure if she's a freelancer, but I suppose the mixture of you both losing so much work as well, it's just got to have a huge effect. I don't know whether it has, but it has for me, definitely. I feel very sad at the moment. Just like to try and motivate yourself to actually do something is really difficult.
Yes. Yeah, I think I mean, it's been much worse for Ruthie than me, because she's a performing musician like yourself, and therefore when concerts are cancelled, that's it. It's all over. And she had a big year of touring and all sorts of things going on this year. So it was a year she was really looking forward to. And so that's a real pain. Yeah. So that's difficult. But I suppose what you're talking about, that sort of maybe the stamina which is required to get up again and self-generate and constantly self-generate. I suppose that's something which I've been used to doing for years and years and years anyway. It doesn't necessarily make it, this doesn't necessarily make it any easier. I must say it makes it more, even strangely, it does make it more difficult. I could say to you, well, I'm in the same room doing the same stuff, so why is it any more difficult? But somehow it is, because generally my year is peppered with me going off for performances or recordings or rehearsals. I run my own band, so I do a lot of performing myself. So all of that has stopped.
Yeah, and I mean, we're kind of. I know I talked about being slightly more isolated as a composer, and obviously, like when you're a pianist, you're quite isolated as well. But I just think it's so important to us, like for our creativity, to get out there and be with other people.
Yeah.
and you like hang out with other people and rehearse with other people, make music with other people, go for a pint, you know, just be around other
Yeah.
people, which is what I've been struggling with, definitely.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
just being four walls
Yes.
constantly is.
Yeah. Yeah. You could paint them. You could paint them a different colour every
Oh my
week.
God.
Yeah. All right. Maybe it's a bad idea.
So then
Yeah.
you've said at the beginning you've got this app, you're composing a piece of music for this app,
Yeah.
which is amazing. But tell us, after lockdown, hopefully, what's the future? What's next? What can we tune into? Anything from Graham Fitkin Band coming up?
No, but the album which I've been working on again for probably 2 years is an album called Shifter, which involves quite a lot of Moog. It involves guitars, it involves Ruth on harp, and a few other bits and bobs, and also some environmental sounds. And that is the thing which I'll be focusing on from the autumn onwards, probably. I've got to finish this piece which is an orchestral core piece based on Humphrey Davy, the chemist Humphrey Davy, which is going to take up most of my time for the next 6 months. And after that, Shifter will be the next thing, the thing which will sort of get out there. The reason it's called Shifter is it's about ecological shifting bass lines. So without getting too technical about it, it's a term which is used for when over a series of generations we forget, because we weren't alive perhaps, what the norm is. So the norm in my childhood may have been what I grew up getting used to, whereas my parents and their parents will think of it as being completely abnormal to have a childhood like that. And then when I get to their age, and people of what would have been my children's generation, if you like, the same thing will be constantly happening. So there are, for instance, I can tell you a story by a scientist in Canada who I've been talking to about this, who came up with this term. And he said on the on the west coast of North America, you used to fish by being able to go out, put a bucket in the water, scoop the bucket up, and you'd come up with fish. Fishing was so easy that that's what you did. So this is many, many years ago. This is 100, 150 years ago. But the idea of doing that, just the idea of being able to do that, is so absurd now that nobody would think that had ever happened. You'd sort of think, it's a story. It didn't really happen like that. And that is a very conscious. There's a lot of scientific evaluation of what a shifting baseline is. Where is that baseline? What are we trying to say? So people say, let's save the rhino, or let's save the whale. That's fine, but where do you stop? Because it's constantly shifting. Should we be? Why do we want to bring the countryside back to this particular state? Perhaps that state wasn't the best state. Perhaps it was before that. Or, so where do you go? And it's that thing which has imbued the music in many ways, of things which maybe at the beginning of the piece and at the end of the piece you hear. You think nothing's changed, but it actually has changed a lot, perhaps.
Cool. Ecological shifting. Now, I'm really interested. Do you think the current maybe political state that we're in, the current climate crisis, will inspire you further at some point?
Well, I mean, I've always been a bit of an eco. I used to work for the Green Party back in the 90s, actually, and Greenpeace as well. So it's always been close to my heart, that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm a massive Greta Thunberg fan. Her podcast, which she did, her diary of when she went to the States, was just brilliant. I mean, what a brilliant individual.
Oh, I'll have to check it out.
So sort of coruscating in the way she just gets straight to the truth.
Yeah,
it's it's superb. So I think it's it does inform what I do in some way, and this album has got things to do with climate change. I've got, for instance, there's found sounds and environmental sounds from sub-aqua sounds, if you like, because there's a lot of noise pollution underwater. You look out over the sea and you think it's perfectly calm, but actually underneath that sea, it's becoming more and more noise polluted constantly, and that has a massive effect on the fish and everything else which goes on there. So one of the things I learned during this project was that trawlers, for instance, fishermen will know this, fisherwomen will know this, but trawlers have audio lures on. So they actually lure the fish to the boats. From a capitalist point of view, it's perfectly understandable. Of course, why wouldn't you do that? But this sort of that makes a noise. That's a big noise. There's all sorts of noises. There's military sonars which are going on under the water around the UK coast, where if you swim into it, you will die. Nobody knows. A lot of people do not know about this stuff, and it's fascinating. Combined with the geological sonars and everything else which is going on, it's getting increasingly noisy. So that was a big sort of bugbear of mine as well.
Wow. Well, I'm going to look forward to all these next pieces and shifter and things like that. So do you want to talk about anything else? Have I missed anything? Do you want to tell us about?
I think that's sort of covered.
Do you know what? One silly question I have.
Yeah.
Why are all your, not all, of course, why are most of your pieces just one word? What are the titles? I mean, apart from Hard Fairy. And why is Hard Fairy 2 words?
Yes, good point. Well, I find titling so difficult. It's such a tricky thing to do. Some people seem to find it very easy, but I generally title a piece after I've written it. Not always, but often. And I suppose it harks back to what I was saying right at the beginning, that I need to make, for my own pitiful brain, I need to reduce things down to a minimum. So one word seems to be easier to think of than two or three or four. So generally it's been one. But also I wanted to not be too descriptive in the title, but give an impression of the music from the title. So at the point where there were lots of single syllable titles, the directness and the sound of a single syllable title, so mesh or stub, hook, loud, flack, these things, they give an impression of the music as well, just in the sound of them. So that was part of it. Hard Fairy, well, okay, so Hard Fairy was a different one. I'll now tell you a tiny little story. So I was looking for a title for Hard Fairy, having written it. There's a local theatre close to us called the Minnock Theatre, which is an open-air theatre.
I was there in the summer, Graham. Oh, God, I love the Minnock.
There you are. Yeah, it's great.
Porthcurno.
We're near Porthcurno, yes, it's just over there. And Ruth did a concert actually at the Minnock this last summer during lockdown. It was her first concert for God knows how long. Anyway, that's another matter. I was there because I can't remember why I was there particularly. I was there for a rehearsal, and I was particularly, and it was a Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was particularly entranced by this one girl who, teenage, sort of goth, massive boots, always smoking. She was a woodland nymph, and she was just she had an aura about her, which was quite extraordinary, really. And she wasn't giving a fuck about anybody. And she didn't want to be there. She didn't want to be a woodland nymph. No way did she want to be a woodland nymph. And the last thing she was going to do was do what the director wanted her to do. Right. And she was scary. She scared me, and so she became Half Fairy.
She's a Half Fairy.
So that was my silly little anecdote. That's why it's called Half Fairy. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Graham, it's been so lovely to talk to you. So lovely to have a catch up.
It's been lovely. Thank you very much. Sorry if I've gone on a bit.
No, not at all. I could talk to you all day, but I'm well aware that it's, a lovely day and we should all maybe get some fresh air.
Indeed, yes.
Cool. Right, Graham.
Good.
I will speak to you really soon. Thank you so much again.
Hope so. Okay. Pleasure at all.
Lots of love.
Bye. Have a nice weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.